Okay, in this lesson, we're going to start doing the setup. Remember we talked about the sari in the very first lesson, how it was intersecting with the belt. So this is something that I think it's going to be something that we're going to take a look at right away. Again, like I said, I think I'm going to try to leverage Maya's cache playback just to kind of get a default sim, see what it's going to get me before I started changing a bunch of stuff. And I have gone ahead and add a color onto all the meshes so I can see if there's any penetrations or whatnot. So this is kind of a good way to debugging if when you do a simulation. Now I only change the sim mesh and other meshes. On the core output, I didn't change anything because generally you want that to be the same how this came from modeling department. You don't want to change their texture or their color. Ideally, you can set up the texture that when you press 5, you get these solid colors or random colors, and then when you press 6, which is supposed to show the textures, and then you'll get that. That's probably is something that I would set up if I was in the production. So now that it's already simmed, well, interestingly, a lot of these mesh kind of stuck together, which tells me that I think, well, I mean, we could just be really lucky, but I feel the collision is probably too big, and then so they are actually intersecting with each other, and therefore they're sticking together. But surprisingly, nothing explode. I actually really do expect the bottom part is gonna explode. So I'm just gonna hide that mesh and just see what's happening here. I do see some jittering here. I still think it's safer to kind of remove collision on these areas. It is kind of tricky though. If I remove collision on this part, then what is going to happen is the top mesh is gonna intersect through. So basically there will be no collision in between, and that could potentially cause some issues. Just turn this off for now. So what will be the first thing I do? I guess the fastest way usually is just adding, painting some input attracts. So what I know is above the build, I want it to be 100% input attract. So we can do that right away. First thing is we can go to dynamic property. We'll do the input attract. We'll lock value 1 or greater. And then I will come down here to paint, nCloth and vertex map, and input attract. So yeah, like you see, everything is white. Generally, this is what I do actually. And we'll do something like that. Maybe not too load on these areas, because you want them, you know, to be kind of free. You can smooth them out if you want to. I don't think I need to. I'll do it just 1, I think. So this will be kind of gradual. Then, okay. So then we'll do the top. Like I said, the top it seems to be okay. One thing I want to check is how thick my collision is. See, Because of how big the character is, generally Maya by default will set up these giant collision thickness. So what we can do is, this is the value generally I set to 0.01, and looks like that's a little bit better. It's too bad some of these is already intersecting, so maybe that's also why the cloth is sticked onto the body. Can't really go too low. I mean, because at some point then there's literally just no collision if you if the value gone too low. So let's see. But it's not too bad, I think. As long as the mesh aren't exploding, I think we're quite okay. Alternatively, if this is going to cause an issue, what we can do is we can make a blend shape and then just have these areas without intersecting at first, and then we'll slowly blend back at, say, 10-20 frames and kind of pushes outwards. There's also another settings here in the collider that we can also do, put a push out value with the trap check. So potentially this could also push the cloth outwards. Let's see if it actually does that. Yeah. But that also could mean that cloth now is free and it can just probably just fall to the ground because there's nothing attached to it now. I think I will still show you how I would set up properly without this automatic stickiness, I guess. I would just still paint it like I would in the production. But let's just sim for a little bit longer. What is that? Looks like there's some mesh penetrating. Ah, there are inner meshes that it's coming through from the inside out. Yeah, and that's also another issue sometimes. If I can take a look without, yeah. So sometimes you'll get this, there are mesh on the inside. Then you'll kind of need to put self collision on just to push these things out, and then but sometimes this could also be very problematic. But let's try. I will also double check on the collision on the cloth, which is also very high. Let's just check everyone's collision. So yeah, this is something that I generally do before I even throw into the shot. Tpose sim could really show you a lot of problems before you publish your rig to the production floor. So it's always worth trying. Do a quick sim before saving and publishing it. Woo. But yeah, I think now the cloth is trying to, it's going to slide off very quickly. But in a way, this is what we want. I want something to be more free. I'd rather this happen instead of there's some sort of error or issues that it's like happy accident, but generally it's kind of something that will hurt you down the road because you never know. Like with nCloth, I always feel like if there's a problem in the beginning, that problem will persist, meaning it's kind of one of those things that once you break the seal, your sim is never going to be right. So I always try to make sure they're try not to have any penetration. I know it's really hard when you're getting model from someone, but you're gonna have to try your best. Just start a sim with a good clearance of intersection of self IPs or IP against another mesh, you know. So, but yeah, let's take a look at. I think the bottom one is gonna work out pretty well actually. So let's just take a look. Ooh. All right, so this is kind of exactly what we want. Everything is kind of clear freeing and then it's gonna fall off itself. So it tells me that the collision on this could be a little bit thicker. So that's what I would do. And whoop, let me turn that off real quick. And maybe these guys can also be slightly thicker. I don't want to be too thick though. Of collision thickness. Okay, I want her to change this to 4 face as well. When I do a cloth rig, I generally try to set to the face, 4 face collision flag. I know this takes longer time, but I always feel like it's good to debug this way because if this works and you want speed later on, you can always dial back down. But let's say if you start with a vertex and your simulation worked out great, but then you later found out that you need to have a better collision and you switch to face collision, then everything started blowing up. So I think it's I think it's better to benchmark your rig with the full face flag on already. Okay, so let's see, that one seemed to be okay. That one seemed to be okay. I thought this one we set the collider, well, we had the input attract already. Must be not strong enough. Sometimes what I would do also is just simulate one object at a time. In this case, it's a really viable option. Trying to do this without the caches being affected. I think if you do hide on high, it tends to be what is it? It will kind of reset. So even though I have an input mesh attract on and it's locked, it's not working. Something tells me that maybe this is, or it is set to per vertex. So that's concerning. Okay, in the meantime, I kind of want to see how much penetration we get. Not too bad. Self-intersection, it's pretty tough. Maybe 3 is the way to go. Yeah, see, the problem here is this is already intersecting from the get-go, and that's gonna be an issue for us, to be honest. There's nothing that I can really do other than kick back to modeling, have it, you know, make sure there's no intersecting. But yeah, stuff like this could be really, really problematic. Okay. I still need to figure out why this mesh is not attached to his body. So let's just take a look at the paint again. Ah, yes. See, sometimes this will happen. You saw me clearly painted, but must got painted from someone else or somewhere else, a different parameter maybe. The joy of Maya. Oh, the thickness. Alright, let's just paint this guy. Oh. Hello. Oh, thickness will paint it all. Okay. Oh, that part is really glitchy. I don't know what's going on there. Alright, so for the top. How are we gonna do this? I think what a lot of people do, probably the first thing is just kind of paint these upper area, but to me, to be honest, I actually really like keeping the upper area to have a little bit more movement, because you just never know. What I actually like to paint is this area. I really like to paint the shoulder, because honestly, a lot of people doesn't really notice that our shoulder doesn't move unless the character is upside down. So I feel like it's really safe to paint like areas like that. Obviously I don't want to paint upwards, because that's where actually some of these are, there's a folds going on. I could, however, paint weights down here. So these parts, it's okay that, you know, it doesn't look like it's moving. So I can do that. So this kind of like, you know, you just kind of have to put some forethoughts into it, and maybe some trial and error as well. That seeing how you want the cloth to be sticking to the body. Ideally, also gonna want to paint some underneath here. Yeah, see, these are like different sided mesh, so I can paint there a little bit on my heart until my heart's content. Some of these guys in the back. Some back here. So the more organic you go about doing this, obviously the more organic the cloth is going to look. So another tricky part is here. This is the two sides it's going to try to kind of stick together. So I kind of want to paint them a little bit so then, but it doesn't look like something is glued them together. I think that might work for now. There are times I also just paint straight down of the arm because I feel like, again, somewhat logical for me and no one really noticed that. Okay, so we want to save here and give it a try. So what I was checking on earlier was why the bottom sari is not following is whenever you paint something on the attribute, nCloth is supposed to switch this from texture to per vertex. So, but there are times you will do that, but you know, it doesn't switch it over. So you just have to be aware of that. Yeah, so for example, I was painting the thickness and then thickness did not change. So this is another place that you can take a look in case something's happening. Okay, so one thing I noticed here is also I noticed some intersection here. Maybe the thickness need to be bigger, but I also noticed that I'm losing the form of this cloth. See how the wrinkles are being spread out. So I think what I need to do is probably paint a little bit more on the cloth, or make sure that the value is higher, because I hit the smooth once already and I think that's gonna make the cloth that doesn't lock down as much. And I should probably also try to make sure the cloth that kind of stick how far the arm is. So let's say probably just drop down to here instead of sliding all the way down to halfway to the forearm. So that will be the next thing I will try to do. So input measure track, somehow it's not turned on. That's okay. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do the object space. Object space for this guy as well. Stretch down, I think we'll maybe do 5 here. And because the character is so big, if you look at the grid, I mean, it's not in a bad way, but a lot of time we model, it just tend to be like that. The scale is a little bit big. So what I normally do is change the space scale a little bit lower. It kind of all depends. A lot of time people are saying that the 1 unit, it's 1 meter. So the space scale of 1, it's meant for 1 meter. And so when it goes to centimeter, you want to do 0.1 or 0.01. But for me, I think the way I judged it is it kind of depends on how big your cloth mesh compared to a default mesh sizes. So for example, this is a sphere by default, and it's going to be a scale of 1. If I start scaling up, let's say, I guess that's roughly how big my cloth is going to be. So that's 30 times. So you can potentially just do that, kind of reverse engineer 1 divided by 30, and then that's going to be your value. It doesn't have to be that exact. Sometimes, you just want to get the feeling right instead of to have an exact value. But that's kind of like give you a general idea of like how much you should lower it. We'll try 0.1. I think that's going to work pretty well. And then if it doesn't, and then we can go even lower. And the lower you go, obviously, the heavier it feels. So you can make it look big and floaty by going the other direction. So instead of space scale of 1, you can do 2 or 5. And that's pretty rare. I think if we're doing slow motion, generally we'll go with the time scale instead of changing the space scale. Space scale is something you just, once you set it, you don't really mess with it. So again, the bottom sari seems okay. The top one is still, I guess, unfurling itself. So I think I need to lock down this area on the shoulders, just kind of keep them intact. And then keep this part from sliding. Let me check on the back just to see. Yeah. Let me also just check, make sure input measure track is changed per vertex, so it should be working. It's just not working very hard, I guess. I mean, I guess these values aren't very good either because I can do the eye drop. I think sometimes it's like you can kind of tell they're like 0.8 instead of 100% because of the smoothing. So I'm gonna try this actually. I'm gonna try to paint onto it. This should help a little. I know it's kind of cruel. But yeah, sometimes these things it is just about trial and error. Okay, maybe I won't smooth it this time. I think I'm just gonna, I want to keep this 100% value. We can smooth it later, I guess, if we see some sharp transitions when it comes to simulation. Like for example, this area could be an issue, but I can just smooth it like this instead. I think that should be okay. Maybe I can paint some area on the inside, so make sure the inner cloth doesn't go anywhere. Yeah, this is sometimes it's a joy of being a CFX artist. You kind of gotta go everywhere where people don't really see. I think I'm gonna give that a try. I noticed the cloth drops down quite a bit, even though I have an input measure tracked on. So that is concerning. Yeah, so it should not be like this. Especially input measure tracks 1. It's locked value greater than 1. Potentially there's probably some stretching going on as well, so I can turn on the stretch resistance. Won't go too high on the compression. I want to keep the bend low because I want to keep those wrinkles going on there. So don't see anything out of place. I think it should be good. Let's just I think it's working. Sometimes it could also be just the cache isn't reset properly. You know, I need to really go back to frame 1 and then have a recached. This is kind of new workflow that I'm trying to adapt with Maya 2020 because the cache playback, it's kind of convenient that you can still look at your attribute parameters while it's simulating the background. I believe this is something that they have in Houdini as well. But yes, the rules still apply. You need to hit the back rewind button all the way to the first frame for cloth to reset. Whatever the settings that you change, the parameter you change, it will not stick until you rewind the timeline. So, but I can see it's working now actually. Just giving the fact that my cloth isn't moving as much for the first several frames. So I think this is gonna, I can stop the video here. This is gonna bring us to a very good place where the rig should be. Next video, I will put on some animation that I got from Maximo, and then we will start dialing more settings, and then to get a look and then see what other issues that we're going to run to. Alright, so see you in the next video.